Today, we're building the ultimate sidebar for your portfolio or your design system with expanded and collapsed states and plenty of interactivity as well. Let's rock and roll. Okay, let's get started building out our sidebar. So I'm going to go into my central icon system to start and just pull in a home icon. And this is really going to serve as the foundation for everything that we're doing to start. Okay, so when I'm building out my sidebars, I kind of like to have one layer here, not one layer, one auto layout frame for the interaction. So the hover and selected effects, where I'm going to set that to 5 and 5. And then on that frame, I'm going to press Shift and A and add another auto layout frame and set that padding vertical and horizontally to 10. So just leave that as is. And what that's going to do is going to give us sort of this outer perimeter box. So give us like that sort of almost built-in padding to our sidebar, which houses the icon or the frame that's going to have our default hover and selected state on there. So that doesn't make sense. Bear with me for now. Let's call that icon, create the components, and then add a variant. Now, I'm not going to be building out a full variable library for this. If you want to learn how to do that, I'll put a link in the description for episode 1 of our Build a Design System series. But what that series is meant to do is just sort of meant to get you started on building a design system. It's not going to build the best looking design system. So that's why I'm kind of just going to be manually applying a lot of the variables that we're going to be using today. So bear with me as I have a little cheat sheet here, the variables that I'm going to add to build a sidebar that looks pretty good. Okay, so we have our default. Let's go ahead and actually call this our status. We're going to have our default. And then this here is going to be our hover. And then this one is going to be our selected. So one thing I want to do as well is I want to add 8 as the corner radius on the inner frame here. So set that to 8. And then let's go ahead and customize our selected. So bear with me as I use my cheat sheet here. So for fill, for our selected, I'm going to zoom in here, apply that variable here. And again, if you want to follow along with me, just be sure to pause the video, enter in the same colors that I do, and you can always go back a little bit later on and manually adjust to your brand. There we go. So we have our default. So we have our hover. So while hovering, and then we have our selected. There we go. Let's be sure just to test it out real quick. There we go. So let's just add a quick frame here. Let's go ahead and just preview that. Click, and there we go. I can see that changes accordingly. Awesome. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, maybe one thing as well, on when you click this, it sets you back to default. So the interesting thing about sidebars, one of the reasons why I'm filming this video, is to be able to demonstrate the proper functionality, you're going to have to set up your components, your designs here a little bit different than how you would prep them for development. Because development's like how you would prep these for a dev handoff isn't going to give you the necessary functionality you would need in order to pass it off to your developers in order to show them how that sidebar should operate. And we're going to get to that a little bit later on here. Now, if you think about a sidebar, you might have icons and then you might have it expanded, but this also has a label. Now, if one of these icon items has submenu items, maybe you don't want to expand the side menu in order to see those. Maybe you still want to be able to access those side menu items just by clicking the selected state. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to build out a miniature menu here. So let's go ahead, add some auto layout, and we're going to structure it relatively the same. So set it to 5 and 5, and then add another frame, set that to 10. Let's set that to left aligned, left center. There we go. And we're going to set that to hug. We're going to call this our menu item. We're going to go ahead and create the component of this. And now let's go ahead and copy an instance. Now we're going to build out our miniature menu here. So with this, what I'm going to do is really just copy and paste this like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe just 8 times. We're going to call this our menu. And then let's go ahead and create the component of this. And one thing I want to do as well is on each of these, go ahead and add a fill. Let's add a fill at the menu layer as well, and then also add a corner radius of 8, and maybe just a real subtle stroke. Oops, just on the outside. There we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take an instance, delete that, and then paste it inside of the menu, and then use our absolute positioning to position it accordingly. Now let me just zoom in here real quick. One thing we also need to do is be sure to clip that content. So now those nice round edges are maintained. There we go. Awesome. So I think we're looking in some pretty good shape. And one thing I also want to do here is just use our constraints, set that to right and set that to top. Perfect. So now, if all goes to plan, let's go ahead and simply place this inside of a frame. Preview. Oh, sorry, it's way too small. Let's present. Now, if I hit this, then you can see that the menu pops out with it. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the interaction that we're trying to achieve. So we have our closed icon state. Next, what we're going to look at is actually that expanded icon state, where if you would hit maybe some type of icon to expand that menu out, it's going to give all of these icons a label and also maybe even a drop down to show some of these menu items if hit. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're actually going to add in an open state for these icons. So if this is our closed state, picture an open state that has a label, maybe a drop down to access these other menu items within the navigation itself and not sort of floating over everything. So what we're going to do, we're going to add in a variant here that we're just going to call our type. And these here are going to be our closed. Oops. What's going on? Sorry, I'll hit these. This is going to be our closed. And then we're going to bring in a copy of these, and these here are going to be our open. Now, in the case of, if you watched any of our other tutorials by now, you'll know we always like to have an icon left and an icon right layer property and all that jazz. But for now, what we're not going to do is offer the option, in case, at least in this sidebar that we're building, to either swap out these icons or hide the icon left. So let's go ahead and just add in a menu and just simply bring that inside the inner frame here. There we go. Set this to hug and hug. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy the icon left and then switch it to the icon right. And we're going to set this to a chevron down. Where's our down? There we go. So let's then offer the option to change this text. So we're going to call this our label. And then for the icon right as well, maybe in this case, we don't want to offer the option to change this from a chevron, but we do want to offer the option to hide this icon right if there's no submenu inside that navigation item. So then we're going to call this show or icon right or icon right. There we go. So then if I copy this out, so I have our status, I have the type, whether it's open or closed. Let me go ahead, open that. And I can choose to hide that icon right and easily swap this out for something like our home. There we go. I think we're in some pretty good shape here. Now what we're going to do is simply just copy what we did for the label and also for the icon inside each of these items themselves. But first, let's move this out of the way. Our menu. There we go. And then take this and then paste it in as well. And we're just going to get rid of that menu for now, actually. And then let's go ahead and just color match. There we go. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. And there we go. Awesome. We're in some pretty good shape here. All right. Now, one thing we also want to do is if we think about how we absolute positioned this, because this is going to be nesting over top of the design. So again, the sidebar is going to be closed itself. But if you think about a sidebar, if I bring these down, you don't necessarily want the submenu to be floating over all the other elements. You kind of want to push all the other elements down. So we're not going to absolute position our menu this time. So let's go ahead, bring this out, copy and paste that instance. There we go. And then we're going to paste it inside. Again, instead of absolute positioning it, we're going to use our auto layout to position it above and then set that to fill. There we go. So in the grand scheme of things, then, if we go ahead and test this out, so if we set this is open, set this to selected, notice how it pushes all the other items down, which is kind of the functionality that we want to see. Okay, perfect. So I think we're in some pretty good shape in terms of our, actually we're going to call this our menu items, or navigation items, navigation items. Let's go ahead and delete that. So I think we're in some pretty good shape. Now let's go ahead and start piecing together our sidebar in a way that would be consumed by our developers. But one thing we're going to realize is that if you're building out a prototype, the way that you would build this out for developers wouldn't necessarily have the proper functionality. We're going to get to that a little bit later on. Okay, next let's go ahead and piece together our navigation components. And one thing I've done here is very similar to what we did with our navigation items. I've just basically done the same for the UI Collective logo here. So we have our closed state and we have our open state. So if you want to do that as well, go ahead, pause the video and do the same with your logo. Okay, what we're gonna do, so I'm gonna bring in the UIC logo here, and I'm gonna start to bring in some of these navigation items. So let's go ahead, add some auto layout, set the gap to 0. Maybe you want to add 2, 3, 4, 5, then maybe a 6. So all my background is in financial technology. That's really where I learned how to do all this stuff. So maybe build like a fintech app. So maybe if we want to swap this one out here for like a bank, let's see what we got. A bank. So think about maybe this is accounts, then maybe let's look for stocks. So you might have like your investments. Then you might want to have your goals. What do you have for goals? Target seems pretty good, like your financial goals. And then maybe people or family. Let's see what comes up for family. Yeah, I think that works. Maybe you have your family, and then maybe you have your settings down below. So then you might have your settings. Perfect. Okay. So one thing I'm going to do here, maybe I want to offer a little bit of separation between the rest of the menu items in this logo. So I'm going to add a stroke just on the bottom here, and let's set it to something like that light gray. I think that works. And then maybe because maybe you want to keep emphasis on these items here, and the settings kind of comes afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an auto layout frame, set that to fill. And what that's going to do, hopefully, is push down that settings all the way to the bottom of the page. It will do the exact same treatment that we did for the logo, but on the top to offer just a little bit of differentiation there. Okay, perfect. I think it's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and test it out real quick in a desktop again, just to give you a little bit of a visual. First, let's add some auto layouts. Bring in our copy so far, and we're going to remove the padding from all around it. And let's go ahead then and set that to fill. I can see how the settings stays at the bottom and all our other elements here stay at the top. Let's go ahead and present that. Fill the screen. There we go. So I think our sidebar is looking pretty good. If I was to click any of these elements, see how that menu shows up with it. Okay, maybe one thing as well, what I want to do is also just offer a stroke just on that right-hand side. There we go. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and delete that. Next what we're going to do is we're going to create the component of this and call this our navigation bar. Navigation bar, sidebar, whatever it is that you want to call it. Let's then go ahead, add a variant here. And next what we're going to do, move this out of the way. Sweet. So we have our closed sidebar. Next what we're going to do is look at our open sidebar variant. Okay, next what we're going to do, we're going to look at sort of like the open state for this. So we're going to work on the open state, then start getting about how a user would be able to toggle between the open and closed state. So let's go ahead and just call this our type. Our type this here is going to be our open or our closed, and then this one is going to be our open. So with our open, what we're going to do is just select each of these and even also the logo as well. Actually, no, we won't do that for now. Something's wrong there. And then set that to our open, and then set this one also to our open. Set that to hug the contents accordingly. And one thing that I'm realizing here is we kind of want sort of the inside to fill, to take up the full width. So let's go back and adjust this accordingly. So we're going to set that to fill, set that to fill, and then set that to fill. Hopefully I didn't break anything. And we also want to set the inside to fill. Sorry, excuse me. So making design systems is all about making components, all about making mistakes along the way, as long as we come back to fix them a little bit later on. Okay, so now I think we're in some pretty good shape here. So if I extend that out, I can see that the arrows follow with it. Okay, now comes sort of like the hard part as to, sorry, let me zoom in here. Perfect, those intersect. Okay, so the fun part, so maybe this is our home. Maybe this is, what did I say before? Our accounts, our investments, our goals, our family. So see sort of the accounts that maybe like your family holds. If you're a parent, want to see how much money your kids have. I don't know, something like that. And then this here is our settings. So for our settings, we probably wouldn't need that icon, right? So we're going to go ahead and hide that. Maybe for family, we also want to hide that icon right. And then for home, we want to hide that icon right. So only our accounts, investments, and goals actually have that dropdown. Okay, so now that we have our sidebar looking pretty good, let's go ahead and add in a way where we can easily, a user would be able to easily swap between these variants. So let's go into our central icon system here and search for Chevron. Our Chevron right. So sorry, that's Untitled UI. It's another one of my favorite libraries. So let's go keep things consistent with our central icon system. So we have our Chevron right. Let's go ahead, set that to 2. And let's go ahead and add a frame here. And maybe we're going to set this to 5, so it's nice and thin like that. Let's go ahead, add in a fill. Something like that gray works just fine. And then what we're going to do is let's add maybe just an 8 radius on either side. And then we're going to add call this our control. Let's go ahead. Sorry, let me move this. Give ourselves a little bit of space here. Let's go ahead, create the component of this, and now add a variant where all we're going to do is just swap this from an icon right, Chevron right, to a Chevron left. There we go. So now let's go ahead and position these, or absolute position these within our, sorry, what's going on here? There we go, inside of our menu item. So copy, paste. And now let's use the absolute positioning tool to bring this all the way up and just eyeball the rough position of it. Something like that. But again, keep it nice and level with the sidebar itself. There we go. Something like that is fine. Set our constraints to right and set our constraint to top. Then what we're going to do, let's do the same. Paste it within our second variant and then simply just position it. Just as we did the same. There we go. But then set this to our variant 2. So let me make sure we did. Yep, I think that works just fine. So when we think about the interaction, you would hit this icon in order to extend that out. Maybe one thing too, I think these are a little wide for me. Let's maybe set these to something like 2. And then something like 2. Sorry, now I'm just really getting picky here. Position that back. And then position that back. Okay, so what this is going to do then is it's going to swap from one variant, and this one's going to swap back to this one. So then if we go into drag this inside of our frame, let's set this to fill. Let's go ahead and present this. Be sure to hide the UI. When I hit this, I can see that our sidebar adjusts with it. Now, you'd think that this would work, and again, this does work in the context of prepping your components for development. But if you're building a really complex prototype, what you're actually going to have to do is kind of violate this a little bit. So I'm not saying delete this entirely, because you're going to need this for developer handoff, but you need to now manipulate these components. So copy and manipulate these components in a way that's going to work in order to build the most interactive sidebar possible for your prototype, to either test with users or showcase to your developers the desired functionality. So what we're going to do next is look at some of the issues of this approach in the context of a prototype. Okay, so now that we have our sidebar and its related elements prepped for development, one thing we need to do now is prep these for a prototype, which we wouldn't necessarily share from a component standpoint with our developers. So first off, let's go ahead and take a look at how this isn't the right approach for a prototype, despite it being the right approach, for dev. So one thing I want to go ahead and do here is just check something real quick. So if I call this just, or maybe like a checking accounts. So that something's off there. So let's go in here. Let's maybe set this to hug and then set this to fill. And let's just extend this out. Sorry, probably not the right way to do it, but I want to break it anyway. Okay, so then let's go ahead and set this to our selected. And now let's just extend all these out. Sorry, I should do this on the main component. I'm a little bit of a rule breaker. So, sorry, this wouldn't be not our home. Set that to our defaults. But maybe we'll set this here to our selected. Okay, beautiful. So what we're going to do then is let's go in, set these to fill. This here is going to be our cash accounts. This here is going to, our checking. This here is going to be our registered account. And then our non-registered. There we go. So one of the reasons why this isn't the right approach is if I do the same thing for accounts as well, and I set this to selected, and then just set this to our checking, sort of the exact same. our registered and then our non-registered is, and then if I go ahead and collapse this, so I've set this to default and then set this to selected, so it retains pretty well, right? So the issue is, and I've tried this with string variables, I've tried this with a number of different methods in the past, but if I go ahead then and reset this and present it, is not all the text always changes, right? Like even if I expand this out as well, sorry, let me hide the UI. If I extend this out and then hit, see, it's just very buggy. Like it never really works as well as you planned. Even if that account's expanded in the other state, notice how it's not expanded here. And there's just a whole bunch of issues that tend to pop up in terms of this from a prototyping perspective. So although we've set all the elements upright for development, again, we now need to prep these for prototyping. So now we're going to look at using our string variables and other approaches as well in order to showcase the desired functionality in a prototype and for our developers. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we have all our components set up for dev handoff, but now we need to prep the prototype. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a weird approach where I'm going to copy all of our navigation items here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to customize these based on the specific navigation item. So let's look at a quick example. So in the context of home, again, if we go back to our main variant here, there's no drop menu items associated with home, right? So what we can do for home, simply get rid of these menus. And then what we're going to do is simply just delete our icon rights. Delete our icon rights. There we go. That's simple. And then we're going to call these our home. Now, what we then need to do is on click. So on click of one of these, we need to change from this to this. So essentially what that's saying is if you think about all of these different navigation items that we have, when one of these is clicked, what we want to have happen is have our icon states, so our closed states, change to our open states. But because now all of a sudden we've disconnected ourselves from this navigation bar functionality, all of a sudden, how is that going to happen, right? So what we need to do is we're actually going to use our string variables. So we have our type of closed and we have our type of open. I'm going to go into my local variables and actually create a string variable. So we're going to call this just type with a set the first value to closed and the second value to open. And notice what these are doing here is they're actually matching the name of our variants. So when I take one of these, bring one of these down, and I'm then going to apply that string variable to the type. So set that to closed. If this was called something different, so if this was called like closed one, notice how Figma recognizes it's a little bit of a disconnect, right? Because our string variable does not match the name of our variant. So in this case, our string variables must match the name of our variants, both at closed and at open, to represent the string variables in mode 1 and in mode 2. So let's look at a quick example. So I have this applied. I'm going to go ahead and just bring in a frame here just to make sure we set this up right. Now, there's a ton of different ways that you might think to set this up. This is the only way that I have found in order to make this work is doing this at the mode level. So let's just bring in just a simple rectangle here, maybe just 2 rectangles. So what this is going to do then, just to test. So on click, we're going to set the variable mode to mode 2. And then on click, we're going to set the variable mode back to mode 1. Let's test this out. Let's go ahead, just reset this and then play this prototype entirely. Notice how it then extends out because it's swapping to the second mode, which is open, which is the name of our second variant. And then that goes ahead and then closes it. And then when I select one of these, notice how no menu item shows up because then we are able to now modify the menus and the other items at the individual navigation item itself. So we're almost giving each navigation item its own singular component. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and delete that. Then now that we have our home out of the way, let's now go ahead and repeat that process for all of the other navigation items that we're going to have in our navigation bar. All right, now let's go ahead and repeat that same process for all the other items in our navigation bar. So let's go ahead and bring these down. One thing I just did here is I just extended this out just to give ourselves a little bit more space. One thing I should do as well now that I'm here, I should set this to fill. So again, we're copying this down from our navigation items itself. So not from the home, because we still want to utilize these menus that we got rid of in the home. So we have our, what we're going to do to start, if this is going to be our accounts, our account items, is let's go ahead to start and simply just change the home to a bank. There we go. Oops, I didn't use the multi-select tool for that. So my apologies. Let's change this to a bank. There we go. Makes things nice and easy. And let's go ahead then and change this to accounts. And let's then stop with that. And let's hide a lot of these items. Again, maybe we only have 3 menu items for accounts. And these are going, so we have our checking, we have our registered, and then we have our non-registered. Non-registered, I hope I spelled checking right. And our checking. Okay, so there we have our accounts. Let's now do the same. So let me bring one of these down. What was one of the other items that we had here? So investments. So investments. This is going to be our investment items. Our investment items. Let's go ahead and adjust all these using our multi-select tool. This is going to be our, what do we have here? Our stocks. There we go, our stocks. And then maybe for stocks, we might have, one more menu item, one more here as well. So for our investments is what we might call this. Yeah, investment, just our investments. So for our investments, maybe we might have, mutual funds, ETFs, fixed income, and then, maybe something like crypto. If I can, crypto, there we go. Awesome. So there we have our investments. Next, what else do we have? So we had our goals. So our goals is also going to be one. Let me bring these down a bit. Bring one of these down. And then we're also going to go with our goals. So maybe for goals, we'll also have 4. So first off, let's go ahead and change the icon. Use our multi-select tool. Set this to our target. There we go. So this is going to be our goals, and then maybe you might have retirement, cottage purchase, vacation home, and then maybe, or home, and then maybe yacht. Oh, I really can't type today. Yacht is the other one, because I went to yacht, be nice. So there we have our goals, and then we have maybe our family, maybe no drop down for this one. So what we can do is we can go ahead, bring this out. There we go. And search for, what was it? I believe it was our users. So first use our multi-select tool, change this to our users. There we go. So there are users. That's going to be for our family. And again, because we don't have the drop down associated with that one, not needed. And then lastly, for our settings. So this one is then going to be our settings. Perfect. So again, use the multi-select tool. Look for our settings. There we go. Oops, and one thing I didn't adjust with the label here. So what do we call it? Up here, we had our family, and then this will be our settings. Perfect. So now that we have a group of variants for all the individual items that will be in our nav bar, next let's go ahead and piece this together. Okay, now let's go ahead and just recreate our navigation bar. So let's bring down one of each of these. Again, the closed state, just like that. And let's also bring down one of our initial icons as well. And what we're going to do is let's just really just select all of these, add some auto layout, set that to 0, and then set that to down. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and really just recreate what we did with the sidebar before. So let's add a stroke just on the bottom here to our icon. Set that to that sort of that light gray, and the same with our settings. So a stroke just on the top, set to that light gray, and then on the right-hand side, set a stroke to the right, and just set that to the gray as well. And then let's place all of these inside of a wrapper and then set that to fill. And one thing we still need to do is we do need to apply that variable, to all of our items here, including the logo as well. And again, if it's showing that it's disconnected, so there's a cross through this, that means that if your variant is disconnected, that means there's either your variant is spelt wrong or the string variable is spelt wrong. So make sure that, again, that those match. Set this to close. There we go. And because I set this to fill, if I bring this down, that should work as intended. Okay, so we're not done quite yet, is we still do need that interactive element, but instead of swapping variants, so what I'm referencing here is these items right here. So instead of swapping variants, they now need to swap variables, and we're gonna look at that next. Okay, so very similar to what we did with our navigation items, where we copied the main component in order to modify it at the individual navigation item level itself. We now need to do the same with our controls. So let's go ahead and copy this control, and let's bring this all the way down, move our navigation off to the side. So now what this needs to do is it needs to go from, instead of changing the individual variants at the navigation level itself, so instead of swapping the variants of the navigation bar, we now need to swap the modes that I had renamed to just closed and then just open. So let's then go ahead and do that to start. So let's go ahead, on click, we're going to change to the close variant, and we're going to set the variable mode to closed, or to open, And then we're going to do the same. So we're going to change the variants to open, and then we're going to set the variable mode to closed. So now if I go ahead and I bring this off to the side, an instance, paste in, and then use our absolute positioning tool to position it along the top. Position it, let me just double check something here. Let's set that stroke to outside. Let's position it, use our constraint, set it to right, and then also to top. There we go. Something like that works just fine. And let's actually go ahead and bring down our frame here. And we're going to get rid of our old sidebar just because this frame has our auto layout applied. We're going to copy this, and then actually we're going to create the component of this first. And then we're going to copy an instance, and then paste it in. There we go. So now if I go ahead and play this, there we go. Let's hide that Figma UI. I can hit this. I can see the variant changes with it. And also our items now expand because now we're swapping those variable modes. If I was to hit accounts, I can see that everything that we had set is then therefore retained. Same with investments as well. Same with goals as well. So there we go. Now we have a pretty well functioning sidebar component that also works for dev handoff and also for our prototype as well. Lastly, I want to cover a pretty common mistake I do see a lot of designers make when they're building out their prototype. It's not really a mistake. It's more so just something that's kind of unique to Figma more than anything else, where if all of a sudden I add this rectangle, whereas despite it being below the navigation, it's appearing on top of the navigation. So what we need to do is we need to go select the frame, and this can also work with subframes as well, is with the 3-dot menu within auto layout, set this to first on top. And what that's going to do is going to put the first element in the layers on top. Again, if you want it the last element of the layers on top, that's what's already defaulted. But if you want it the first on top, you need to modify that canvas stacking. So now in the prototype itself, I can see that this is on top. It's now above the rectangle where I can open and close this as please. So just a quick mistake I often see a lot of designers make when they're building out their prototypes.